Welcome. This is Soothing Whispers ASMR. As always, if there are any words or sounds you would like to see me perform, please leave them below in the comments. Tonight, I thought we could read through some more of Aesop's Fables because I haven't read through any of them in a while, and there are many, many more left to go. Never be without these and a good sewing kit. Needles. Tonight we're going to begin with The Wolf and His Shadow. A wolf left his lair one evening in fine spirits and an excellent appetite. As he ran, the setting sun cast his shadow far out on the ground, and it looked as if the wolf were 100 times bigger than he really was. "Why," exclaimed the wolf proudly, "see how big I am! Fancy me running away from a puny lion! I'll show him who is fit to be king, he or I." Just then an immense shadow blotted him out entirely, and the next instant a lion struck him down with a single blow. The moral is, do not let your fancy make you forget realities. The next fable is called The Oak and the Reeds. A giant oak stood near a brook in which grew some slender reeds. When the wind blew, the great oak stood proudly upright, with its 100 arms uplifted to the sky. But the reeds bowed low in the wind and sang a sad and mournful song. "You have reason to complain," said the oak. "The slightest breeze that ruffles the surface of the water makes you bow your heads, while I, the mighty oak, stand upright and firm before the howling tempest." "Do not worry about us," replied the reeds. "The winds do not harm us. We bow before them, and so we do not break. You, in all your pride and strength, have so far resisted their blows, but the end is coming." As the reeds spoke, a great hurricane rushed out of the north. The oak stood proudly and fought against the storm, while the yielding reeds bowed low. The wind redoubled in fury, and all at once the great tree fell, torn up by the roots, and lay among the pitying reeds. The moral: better to yield when it is folly to resist than to resist stubbornly and be destroyed. The next fable is called The Rat and the Elephant. A rat was travelling along the king's highway. He was a very proud rat, considering his small size and the bad reputation all rats have. As Mr. Rat walked along, he kept mostly to the ditch. He noticed a great commotion up the road, and soon a grand procession came in view. It was the king and his retinue. The king rode on a huge elephant adorned with the most gorgeous trappings, with the king in his luxurious howdah were the royal dog and cat. A great crowd of people followed the procession. They were so taken up with admiration of the elephant that the rat was not noticed. His pride was hurt. "What fools!" he cried. "Look at me, and you will soon forget that clumsy elephant. Is it his great size that makes your eyes pop out, or is it his wrinkled hide? Why, I have eyes and ears and as many legs as he. I am of just as much importance, and—" But just then the royal cat spied him, and the next instant the rat knew he was not quite so important as the elephant. Moral: a resemblance to the great in some things does not make us great. The next fable is called The Boys and the Frogs. Some boys were playing one day at the edge of a pond in which lived a family of frogs. The boys amused themselves by throwing stones into the pond so as to make them skip on top of the water. The stones were flying thick and fast, and the boys were enjoying themselves very much, but the poor frogs in the pond were trembling with fear. At last one of the frogs, the oldest and bravest, put his head out of the water and said, "Oh, please, dear children, stop your cruel play. Though it may be fun for you, it means death to us." The moral: always stop to think whether your fun may not be the cause of another's unhappiness. I remember this fable from when I was a kid. It's called The Crow and the Pitcher. In a spell of dry weather, when the birds could find very little to drink, a thirsty crow found a pitcher with a little water in it. But the pitcher was high and had a narrow neck, and no matter how he tried, the crow could not reach the water. The poor thing felt as if he must die of thirst. Then an idea came to him. Picking up some small pebbles, he dropped them into the pitcher one by one. With each pebble the water rose a little higher until at last it was near enough so he could drink. The moral: in a pinch a good use of our wits may help us out. The Ants and the Grasshopper. One bright day in late autumn, a family of ants were bustling about in the warm sunshine, drying out the grain they had stored up during the summer, when a starving grasshopper, his fiddle under his arm, came up and humbly begged for a bite to eat. "What!" cried the ants in surprise. "Haven't you stored anything away for the winter? What in the world were you doing all last summer?" "I didn't have time to store up any food," whined the grasshopper. "I was so busy making music that before I knew it the summer was gone." The ants shrugged their shoulders in disgust. "Making music, were you?" they cried. "Very well, now dance." And they turned their backs on the grasshopper and went on with their work. Moral: there's a time for work and a time for play. The Ass Carrying the Image. An ass is kind of like a donkey. A sacred image was being carried to the temple. It was mounted on an ass adorned with garlands and gorgeous trappings, and a grand procession of priests and pages followed it through the streets. As the ass walked along, the people bowed their heads reverently or fell on their knees, and the ass thought the honor was being paid to himself. With his head full of this foolish idea, he became so puffed up with pride and vanity that he halted and started to bray loudly. But in the midst of his song, his driver guessed what the ass had got into his head and began to beat him unmercifully with the stick. "Go along with you, you stupid ass," he cried. "The honor is not meant for you, but for the image you are carrying." Moral: do not try to take the credit to yourself that is due to others. A Raven and a Swan. A raven, which you know is black as coal, was envious of the swan because her feathers were as white as the purest snow. The foolish bird had got the idea that if he lived like the swan, swimming and diving all day long and eating the weeds and plants that grow in the water, his feathers would turn white like the swan's. So he left his home in the woods and fields and flew down to live on the lakes and in the marshes. But though he washed and washed all day long, almost drowning himself at it, his feathers remained as black as ever, and as the water weeds he ate did not agree with him, he got thinner and thinner, and at last he died. Moral: a change of habits will not alter nature. The Two Goats. Two goats, frisking gaily on the rocky steeps of a mountain valley, chanced to meet, one on each side of a deep chasm through which poured a mighty mountain torrent. The trunk of a fallen tree formed the only means of crossing the chasm, and on this not even two squirrels could have passed each other in safety. The narrow path would have made the bravest tremble. Not so our goats. Their pride would not permit either to stand aside for the other. One set her foot on the log, the other did likewise. In the middle they met horn to horn. Neither would give way, and so they both fell, to be swept away by the roaring torrent below. And with that, I'm afraid I will have to wish you all a good night. As always, I hope you have sweet dreams.